Well, I hope you all do get it. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
Nice to meet you. I'm from Virginia.
Virginia.
The other Virginia.
The other Virginia. I'm Susie Corbett. I'm from Maine.
Yes, Susan, nice to see you. Thank you. And you'll have to say hi down here to West Virginia.
Up there, up there.
Hi guys, you see me?
Oh, wait,
You look through.
Yeah, there we are.
That's all right. We'll start with them in a minute.
How are you? Okay.
How are you? Nice to see you.
How you doing?
Nice to see you. You've got Susan from Maine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She really runs me.
All the Susans
We
run
call
Maine.
it the government in exile.
I'm doing well. Thank you. Nice to see you.
How are you?
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Coming.
We'll see. You'll know before.
Maybe. Maybe. Want to go ahead and get started?
I'm ready.
You ready? Good.
This is my West Virginia contingent.
Right there.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. I know we're going to have some more folks. We had a really brisk sign up, but as we know, Washington and rain is not compatible with getting anywhere in a hurry. Washington with sun, Washington with snow. I've never seen a place so weather affected in my life. But anyway, I'm Shelley Moore Capito, Senator from West Virginia and one of the co-chairs of the Broadband Caucus here in the Senate. And Angus King from Maine is one of the co-chairs as well. And I'm going to have to say, our efforts, all of our colleagues are talking about broadband now. I think we were talking about it a lot from the rural perspective and some ideas that we had originally. But it's amazing to me when you hear people talk about infrastructure or future or what we're, what kind of things we can agree on and what kind of things we see for our future. Broadband is always included in this, and that's an exciting piece for somebody from a state who's, I think, basically underserved. So today we've been focusing on different areas, and we focused on healthcare. Today we're going to be focusing on education. So it's called Connecting Our Students, Closing the Digital Divide, and the Future of Education. So I want to give Angus a chance. I'm going to be hanging around a little bit, but Senator King from the great state of Maine is here to welcome.
Thank you, Shelley. Well, I want to thank our panel first and our commissioner who's here this morning, who joined me in Maine last summer. We had a wonderful visit. My history with broadband in Maine goes back to the year 2000 when I came up with what one of my constituents said was the worst idea ever conceived by a politician in America, which was to provide a laptop computer to every 7th and 8th grader in Maine. In fact, the one legislator told me that it was the most controversial issue that he ever had seen in his district. He said, Governor, it's abortion, clear-cutting, and gay marriage all rolled into one. But we prevailed. The initiative passed the legislature by one vote. And so every young person in Maine to this day, when they reach the 7th grade, gets a laptop. And now about 2/3 of our high schools also are one-to-one, which is a really tremendous opportunity. And now it seems not all that remarkable, but in 2000, as I say, it was a pretty radical idea. But here's the problem. All of our schools, 98% of our schools, have very good broadband connections. So when you're in school, you're online, you're able to do your research, you're able to work, you're able to interchange and collaborate with your colleagues, but then you go home. And in too many of our homes across the state, Maine, like West Virginia, is a rural state, you're offline. And if you have any service at all, it's probably pretty slow, and it really isn't adequate to the needs of a 21st century student. One of my friends said, why should you power up when you go to school and power off when you go home? And that's essentially the circumstance in many areas of the country. Senator Capito and I got some language into the Education Reauthorization Bill that authorizes the department to fund some research and pilot projects in this area. We've done things in Maine, which I'm sure Susan's going to talk about, we had one program called Check Out the Internet, where you could go to your local library and literally check out a link to get a high speed at home. But the long-run solution has to be better broadband. And this is not only an educational necessity, it's an economic necessity. If you don't have broadband in your community, it's exactly as if there were no highways into your community or no electricity into your community. You're not going to be able to attract and hold businesses, and you're not going to be able to attract and hold people. Can you imagine being with a realtor looking at a house and the realtor says, well, this is a nice house, it's got a nice front yard and a driveway, but by the way, you can never have broadband here. Many, if not most people, would say, well, sorry, I'm going to look at another house or another town or another state. And that's why this is such an important issue. It absolutely is the key to opportunity in the 21st century. It is absolutely analogous to electricity in the 30s or highways back in the 1800s. So we're going to hear from people today who have fought this battle and who I know my friend Susan Corbett has, I think, the solution. And the solution is that there is no single solution. A good friend of Susan and I's in Maine is the president of Thomas College, a woman named Lori LaChance, and she had, I think, the best observation of all in a situation like this. She said, there is no silver bullet, but there is often silver buckshot. The idea being multiple solutions that add up to the way you deal with an important problem. And I think that's what we're going to have to be talking about today, because topography is different, economics are different, distances are different, technology is different, and the technology, of course, is changing dramatically. But I am just delighted to be able to welcome you all here. I was about to say this is an unusually busy day, but they all seem to be. But we are delighted to be able to have you here, and certainly Shelley and I and Amy and John Bozeman and all. I think we're up to 19 senators now in our caucus are all looking for ideas and how we can help from the federal level to support what is going on in all of the states. So with that, thank you, and I turn it back to you, Shelley? Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. I understand Senator Klobuchar was going to be here and is unable to attend, and we may be we may be seeing Senator Bozeman here as we move through the next several minutes. I didn't give my opening statement that my staff very nicely wrote, so I feel like I should at least dive in a little bit. Closing the digital divide is something that we're all very passionate about. The latest numbers that have come out have shown that we've made steps, but they're just incremental steps. They're not big enough and broad enough. We talk about it as an economic tool. We talk about it as health care to help our communities. You talked about home values. We're hearing a lot about precision agriculture, and one of the things that precision agriculture has to have is a connectivity. Now, in a big, broad space like the middle of the country, like Kansas and Oklahoma, where the large fields are, that's extremely important, and they have difficulty with their connectivity. I always ask when I go to schools, I ask a show of hands. I've been doing these things with the fifth graders in a lot of our elementary schools, and I always say, when you leave home, how many of you can do your homework when you get home? And I'm always shocked when there's just half of them raise their hand and the other half doesn't. Now, it might not mean that they don't have any connectivity. A lot of it could be it's too slow, or it's too expensive in a lot of ways. And so they may have access to something, but it's certainly not adequate for them to be able to move forward on projects like Angus was talking about, whether you're doing research or let's say you're trying to download something from the classroom, something larger. It's really, really difficult. And we see this digital divide kind of dividing our country as well. And that is a concern. I'm on a bill with, who is my urban? It's Hassan from New Hampshire to try to look at the difference between the delivery of broadband in the urban setting and the delivery of broadband in the rural setting, and making sure that we're looking at even playing fields here. Just because we live in rural settings doesn't mean we should settle for less. We should be all striving for the same levels, and I think that's something that we're doing. But so I know we have Commissioner Rosenworcel here with us today, and thank you so much for taking time out. I know what is your busy day every day, dealing with all kinds of things, and it's my pleasure to introduce her today. As most of you know, programs at the FCC, like the Universal Service Fund, are imperative to deploying robust and affordable broadband into rural America. An important component of that fund has been support provided by the E-rate program. I'm sure our panelists are very familiar with that. In my state of West Virginia alone in 2016, $19 million in E-rate funding went to our schools. And that helped bring connectivity to over 29,000 students. So prior to her time at the FCC, Commissioner Rosenworcel was Senior Communications Counsel to the Senate Committee on Commerce under my predecessor, Senator Rockefeller, and they launched E-rate under their great stewardship. I know her time with the committee gave her unique insight into the obstacles of rural America, and I appreciate her professional experience, which is extended well beyond the FCC and the Senate. She brings a decade and a half of public and private sector communications law experience to the FCC. Her children also happen to go to school with my grandchildren, so, she's obviously great. But I had to stick that in there, sorry. I don't even know if they're in the same class this year, but they're same grade. But anyway, I consider her a critical ally in our efforts to close the digital divide, and I'm really thrilled to have her here today. So without further ado, FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Capito, Senator King, all of you for being here today. I love that there are now 19 senators that are part of this broadband caucus. It means I'm not the only nerd talking about connectivity. It means I have company and something that's really important for our future. Because I think the future belongs to the connected. No matter who you are or where you live, you don't have a fair shot of 21st century success if you don't have access to modern communications. That's true for all of us. And it's especially true for children. And I say that professionally and as a parent. I think no child can be left offline. That's true in school, and it's true at home. So let's start with school. For 2 decades, what I like to think of as the silent superpower that has been connecting our schools and libraries is the E-rate program. Today, the E-rate program supports broadband connections in classrooms in all 50 states. And I think it's one of the most important activities that the Federal Communications Commission oversees and one of the most important tasks that Congress has given us in order to expand the availability of broadband. And as a result of some E-rate modernization that the FCC did 2 years ago, we now have 39 million students with the broadband they need in their classrooms all across this country. And even better, that modernization did a lot of good for rural America because it increased funding levels of over 65% for our rural schools since those reforms were put in place. So that's broadband in schools. In short, the E-rate program works. We need to support it early, often, and always. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about what Senator King brought up, which is connectivity at home. You see, today, 7 in 10 teachers assign homework that requires internet access. But the FCC data show that 1 in 3 households do not have broadband. And where those numbers overlap is what I call the homework gap. The homework gap did not exist when I was growing up. When I was growing up, if I wanted to do my schoolwork at night, it took a paper, pencil, and my brother leaving me alone. And that third one was definitely the hardest part. But anyway, gone are those days. According to the Senate Joint Economic Committee, there are 12 million kids in this country who do not have broadband at home. In other words, the homework gap is real. And for those students in households without broadband, just getting homework done is hard. Applying for a scholarship is challenging. And while low-income families are adopting smartphones at high rates, let me submit to you right now that that small phone is not how you want to research and type a paper, apply for jobs, or further your education. You know, the Pew Research Center also studied the homework gap, and it found that more than half of our teachers in low-income and rural communities say their students' lack of access to online resources at home presents a real challenge for them introducing technology in the classroom. So not only students who are struggling at home to keep up, that's not just our only problem. The lack of access is actually holding our educational system back. It means too many young people will go through school without developing the skills they need for the digital age. And let's remember that loss is a lot more than individual for that student. It's a loss to our collective human capital and shared economic future that we have to address. Of course, all that kind of rhetoric and those numbers don't tell the whole story. So let me give you a few notions of what the homework gap looks like on the ground. And I think perversely, one of the best places to start is Silicon Valley. Because just a few miles down the road from where our nation's biggest technology companies sit is San Jose. And this might strike you as surprising, but in San Jose, over a quarter of the population does not have internet access at home. And among low-income households, that number is even higher. It's north of 40% by some counts. So Louise Mendoza is one of them. She rents a small room and she raises 4 kids on her salary as a child care worker. She's got 2 phones for her family, and her daughter Annette, who's in high school, says she uses one of them to try to get her schoolwork done. But that screen is so tiny, and doing research on it is not easy when you have a limited data plan. So she says that she often skips lunch at school and tries to sit in the school computer lab to get her work done, but she acknowledges that most of the time she can't get it all complete. And if you drive east from Lexington, Kentucky, you'll arrive in Clark County, and it's where a student we found called Reese Elder does her homework regularly with fizzy drinks and a side of fries. Because for years, she sat for long stretches in a booth at a fast food restaurant because it had the Wi-Fi she needed to do her homework. You see, for too long, this was the only way in her rural community she could get online. And it's a community called Charlestown, which you can look on a map, but most maps don't feature it. It's too small. And finally, there's Hatch, New Mexico, which is a rural community that's actually best known for the chilies that grow in its earthy soil. I had the privilege of traveling there a little while back with Senator Udall. And while in Hatch, we spoke with a student named Jonah Madrid. He plays for the high school football team. But being an athlete in a rural community is not always easy. You see, after the school bell rings, you get on a bus to play another team, but that other team might be an hour and a half away. And after the game is done, you pile back in the bus with your teammates and your equipment. And what Jonah would do is he would get off the bus in the pitch black dark and sit in the school parking lot with a computer in his lap until the wee hours of the morning, because it was the only safe place he knew that he could get a broadband signal. I think kids like Jonah and those kids in California and Kentucky, I think they got tremendous grit. But it shouldn't be this hard. We can do something to solve this problem. I think we can do things to solve the homework gap. So I have a few ideas. I'm going to give them to you now, but let's start with the first. We have to gather more data and raise more awareness. And Senator Capito, Senator King tried to do just that when last Congress they jointly led the charge to get a study of the homework gap in the Every Student Succeeds Act. So I'm going to be a little bit tough on this, where I think they'll be more gracious. But that study's more than 9 months overdue. 9 months? That's a school year. I think it would be justice right now to make sure that we get that study released so we can all see what the homework gap looks like nationwide. But we also have states and cities doing things to try to understand it. I was with Tracy a few months back in North Carolina, where the North Carolina State University is working with the Friday Institute to assess the homework gap all throughout this Tar Heel state. And in my hometown of Hartford, Connecticut, city leaders are coming together to try to do their own assessment. And San Jose, which I mentioned earlier, now has a big digital inclusion study, which makes a nod to the homework gap. And those efforts are good. Second, we need to find innovative things that are happening all over the country. And this is where we're going to act like it's not school. We're going to copy them. You know, carriers in a lot of locations are doing good work in that they are setting up plans that have low-cost broadband and refurbished computers. We should figure out which of those plans are working and make sure others take them on. We also need to make a nod to the cool efforts of libraries, and libraries from Maine to Missouri to New York. They're loaning out wireless hotspots. That student can take that connectivity home, and that connectivity can mean the difference between getting your nightly schoolwork done and not. We've got rural districts who are putting Wi-Fi on school buses. You know, that long time that they come into school and then return home at night, they're turning that ride time into connected time for schoolwork. This Wi-Fi on wheels is something we should keep tabs on and watch. I think it should grow. And finally, we found some cities in Washington and Texas that are doing something totally low cost to address the homework gap. They're making maps for their students that show very clearly where they can get Wi-Fi for free in town. And some of those places are totally predictable. It's the library and the city hall. But you know, the act of actually building those maps does something to a community, because others find that they want to pitch in. And the next thing you know, an insurance company, a small coffee shop, and a hotel lobby say that they'll help too. And you know, we've even found towns in Iowa and Georgia that are going one step further, and they're offering a decal to put in the window of every commercial establishment and institution in town that's willing to be a safe place for kids to do their homework. So just imagine those kind of decals multiplying around town, and the signal that sends to students: we care about you, we want you to succeed, and we will work as a community to do so. So I'll end here because we have another senator sitting here in the room. Look. Listen, we have big problems to solve. We have resources are constrained and communities without the access they need in the digital age. Our broadband challenges can seem overwhelming, but here's a place to start. Let's start small. Let's start with homework, because I think the homework gap is the cruelest part of our new digital divide, but it's within our power to bridge it and fix it. And I think it's a broadband cause that could bring the Broadband Caucus together. And I think this is the perfect place to start fixing it. Thank you.
Very Very good. Very good. We have Senator Bozeman here. Do you want to say a few words, Senator Bozeman? Yeah.
I want to thank you all for being here, and this is so important. It's interesting. I was listening and really did enjoy the talk, but I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, but now I live in the northwest part of the state. It's the fastest growing area in Arkansas, but one of the fastest growing areas in the country. So I was out in an adjacent county, probably 20 miles from this area, and the stories that they told, again, exactly mimicked what you're talking about. You drive by these little schools in the country and in rural America, and kids are sitting on the back of their pickups doing their homework, in the parking lots in the evenings on the weekends. And so there's no excuse for that. But it's also it's not just their education. If you don't have a situation where they can be educated and then the community is going to grow where they can go back to that community, it's a downward spiral for rural America. So we need it for education, to get young people educated. We need it for their benefit also, because that community is not going to grow if it's not wired. It just isn't going to happen anymore. So the good news is, thanks to your all's efforts and again, getting the message out there, we're not just thinking in terms of the 3 R's anymore. We are, roads, railways, roads, railroads, and runways. There is a tremendous effort in a very bipartisan way to see if we can get broadband included and spend the necessary dollars, push the necessary resources to get that done. And we do appreciate all of your all's help in the room. So thank you very much. Thank you.
So we're going to go to the program, but I would like to introduce my guests guests who are Skyping in. We thought this would be a good way to show our connectivity. And so Jason Stark is here from Bridge Valley Community and Technical College. Jason, you want to raise your hand? There he is. There he is. He serves as Bridge Valley. Bridge Valley is a community and technical school in my local community of Charleston, South Charleston, West Virginia. Jason serves as Bridge Valley's Chief Operations and Information Officer, and he works to promote and facilitate the integration of technology into a wide range of areas: planning, programming, training, consulting, and other activities. So I'm going to turn it over to you all for a couple minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Tracy. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, you guys. If you want to introduce your partners there.
Thank you, Senator Captive. Our main college campus is located in Charleston, West Virginia. We have a second campus located in Montgomery, West Virginia. The second campus is very rural. Outside of that, we have a 5-county service region as Bridge Valley. Mainly outside the Charleston area, broadband is spotty at best. In much of the rural areas, there is not adequate broadband coverage. We have successfully leveraged our connectivity to our Montgomery campus to allow small groups of students to participate in classes at our Charleston campus. These students might not have been able to graduate because there wasn't enough interest in a particular class on the Montgomery campus. So it's been very instrumental to helping these people compete and actually obtain a degree. We don't have adequate connectivity in our other service regions, but we hope to expand that connectivity so that our students and our communities can participate in the global economy. Currently, we partner with the state to offer an online highways engineering program for the Department of Highway Workers. This allows them to complete their degree without coming to campus. Our college is able to service more people, but there again, because of the rural areas, that connectivity is still limited. I have Ethan Bishark with me today. I'd like to turn it over to him. He's actually a student here at the college.
Hi, my name is Ethan, and I'm a student at Bridge Valley Community and Technical College. I'm currently studying information technology, and I also serve as a senator for the student government. And the distance learning classes have affected me directly in a positive way. At times, I have to travel to another campus to spread awareness about an upcoming event or provide support to a current ongoing event. The distance learning classes enabled me to not miss a class. By being able to see the teacher, it helps with the hands-on learning. Being outside the classroom, having the broadband internet emulates almost by itself a self-learning environment. Here at Bridge Valley, a lot of communication between staff and students is done by email daily or weekly through a digital newsletter or short current event video. I'd like to turn it over to Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl Fuller, Director of Media Service here at Bridge Valley, and we utilize broadband to allow our students to have access in rural areas. As Jason Stark said, that we have 5 counties that we service. Of those 5 counties, more than 50% are below FCC broadband standards. With broadband, we are able to allow our students and the community to participate in school events, such as we have a pumpkin drop that we do, that the local high schools come together every year annually, and they drop pumpkins. And the pumpkin that does not burst, that high school wins. So what we do, we stream that to the schools that are not able to participate, and we have several of those. We also use live streaming for graduation, for the students and families can participate and be a part of graduation that can't make it. It's very important for us to be able to have broadband to give those communities and students access to, events and education. So we'd like to thank the committee, Mrs. Capito, for just being letting us be a part of this. We thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Tracy Weeks to lead. And as Senator King said, I have to go off to my next thing because it is a busy day. I have to chair a committee. But thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists. And we just got to keep pushing hard. And I think we've made a great effort. Thank you to the commissioner, too, for her great work. She has a great vision and has given us some good ideas, especially getting that report out this 9 months late. I caught that. I caught that. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're so appreciative of the leadership of Senator Capito and Senators King and Boozman and Klobuchar, and excited that they have this opportunity to engage in discussion today around closing the digital divide. I always love getting the opportunity to listen to Commissioner Rosenworcel because she really does capture the stories about taking this from a broad issue, which it absolutely is, to understanding how it affects the lives of individual children around this country. And that's really where this comes to fruition here and why this is such an important issue. I'm Tracy Weeks, and I'm the Executive Director of CETA, which is the State Education Technology Directors Association. We work with all of the state departments of education across the country and their leadership around education technology. E-rate is something that they are very committed to and do a lot of work around. CETA has been in this space for quite some time and actually was able to provide broadband targets to the FCC, which they did adopt in their modernization order a few years ago. And it is those targets to which schools and districts aspire so that they have not just access to the internet, but the kind of access that they need to do quality teaching and learning, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And that becomes very important. The commissioner also mentioned that I'm from North Carolina, and that is a place where we have really worked together as a state, not only in the field of education, but across the state through public and private partnerships to really try to make sure every single school has access to the internet, and now really trying to conquer the homework gap. And I'm so excited that today on our panel we have a nice mix of representation from school systems to local governments to actual centers that are really digging into this digital equity piece. So I'm actually going to start with AJ and ask our panelists to go down the row and introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about how they come into this conversation around digital equity.
My name is AJ Phillips. I'm the Director of Information Technology for Prince William County Schools in Manassas, Virginia. We're the second largest in the Commonwealth with over 90,000 students, 97 schools. Interestingly, the rural part isn't an issue for us, but broadband in my school division is an issue. We recently are utilizing E-rate money to upgrade from 2 gig to 10 gig. And honestly, with 90,000 students, 97 schools, and 11,000 employees, that's not enough. It's not enough. We don't have the funding to continue to get more. We're utilizing what E-rate plans we can, but you build it and they will come. And so I'm very excited we're at 10 gigs, and I'm very nervous and having nightmares it's going to be gone in an instant. And so that's a challenge for us. And also looking at, we utilize E-rate money to upgrade our schools. So of my 97 schools, about half of them, they have an access point in every classroom, which is wonderful. But my other half of the school division, those other schools aren't going to be able to get the benefits from the 10 gig upgrade because they haven't been upgraded yet. So where I have half my school district that's going to be flying high on 10 gig, my other half isn't going to be able to utilize that as well. And so it's a struggle. It's a catch-22. As soon as I get everybody upgraded, I'm going to start all over again. And if it wasn't for the E-rate money, we would not be where we are today with upgrading our schools. It's essential that we have that. And our students will tell you, they get frustrated coming into our schools and having to use their own data. So not only they having to use their data at home, but they're also having to use it at school, and it gets frustrating for them.
Thank you. So my name is Susan Corbett. I'm the CEO of Axiom and the founder of the National Digital Equity Center. Thank you for inviting me today, and thank you, Senator King's office and Commissioner Rosenworcel, for your continued support in our efforts. We are a last-mile broadband provider, so we typically build network where no one else goes. We often hear that from our incumbent providers, well, we're going to get 98%. Those 2% matters because every connection counts. We use a blend of technology. Senator King was right. There is no magic bullet. We use fiber, we use wireless, we use DSL, we use anything it takes to get a connection. And in the wireless world, we'll use every single type of spectrum, including TV white space, which is a non-line of sight technology. We also have a nonprofit side of our company called the Axiom Education and Training Center. We provide the adult education throughout all of Washington County. And where is Washington County? So we're in the most northeast part of the United States. It's where the sun rises first every morning. It's dark down here at 7. It is 2,500 square miles. There are about 31,000 people, 13,000 homes. The family median income is $37,000 a year. We are the oldest county in the country. It takes 4 hours to drive from one side to the other, and we have 2 traffic lights. We're rural, right? On our nonprofit side, in addition to adult education, we also have an after-school STEM program for kids 10 to 18 because we really think that's important to the future employment throughout rural areas and, of course, across the state. And then we do the digital literacy throughout the state of Maine and beyond. In the fall of 2017, our nonprofit rolled out a flagship program called the National Digital Equity Center with a goal of closing the digital divide across the state of Maine and across the United States. And under that center, we are advocates for digital inclusion, which includes affordable broadband, affordable equipment, digital literacy training, and public computer access. Included in that, of course, is the homework app. We are big supporters of that, and we do have a MyFi program where we have some libraries that have devices that students can check out. Not enough libraries have them. So we are very committed. We are the digital inclusion experts in Maine and one of a handful across the country. We are very committed to working not only to connect every single home in Maine, but also to address those digital inclusion efforts. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Scott Boone. I'm the Director of Technology for Kent County Government. For those not familiar with where Kent County is, we're on the eastern shore of Maryland. It's Paradise on the east side of the Chesapeake Bay, so not too far from here. We're wrapping up probably by the end of April 110 miles of high-capacity fiber throughout Kent County. We're connecting up to 67 anchor institutions now. We've adopted the to and through approach, where people focus on hooking up the homes, the businesses, but there's a third element there, which is the anchor institutions, the schools, the libraries, places where these kids can get access. So that was our approach, and we were able to build border to border, north, south, east, west, pretty much in every direction throughout Kent County, utilizing anchor sites, a vast network. And from that network, we've seen everything from wireless providers with fiber backhaul to a fiber to the home provider, which means in Kent County you can now get up to gig speeds in areas where they previously had dial-up or satellite. And so I'm looking forward to that being done and moving on to the next phase. So I'm here to talk about the infrastructure side, but I brought my partner here from the public schools to talk about what we're doing with it. So.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Laura Jacob. I am the Supervisor of Technology for Kent County Public Schools. And in our partnership, we're looking at ensuring that all of our children have all of the resources that they need at the time that they need them. We look at the time that we have our children in school. It's only a third of their day. And we want to ensure that the children, when they leave the school day, that they have all the resources that they need so that they can meet that homework gap, they can get their schoolwork done, and continue their learning beyond just the traditional school day.
Fantastic. You heard the commissioner talk about interesting solutions that states and local education agencies and communities are coming up with, such as putting Wi-Fi on a bus. We even hear about some communities taking those buses that have Wi-Fi on them and parking them in different parts of their school district overnight so that kids can have access during the evening hours and still have that safe place to learn. Creative solutions take a lot of creative thinking and really oftentimes some collaboration. So I'd like to kind of, go down again and see, AJ, what has your school system been doing in terms of trying to address the homework gap?
So interestingly enough, Prince William County Schools were site-based managed. So meaning that principals have their budget, can choose what they want to do in their schools. And some principals have jumped on the bandwagon with getting with companies like T-Mobile and Sprint and getting the Wi-Fi devices, the hotspots for students to take home. But if they don't have that money built into their budget, or anticipate doing that, then they can't do it. And so there still is that gap in Prince William County. 45% of our students are economically disadvantaged, so we do struggle with them having access at home. Another piece of it is we have something in Prince William County where we started called the Virginia Star Program, which is now throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we refurbish computers, our students do, and we give them to families in need. And also when we do that, we connect them with Comcast for the economically disadvantaged low-rate funding for internet access. And we also try to get them connected with Sprint and T-Mobile and a variety of places like that for the lower internet rate. But again, it's a struggle. And to do it as a division-wide, a district as large as ours, we just don't have the funding to do it, to ensure that every student has access at home. There's just no way, and the county is just too large. So it continues to be a struggle. We talk about the kids using their cell phones to do work. Absolutely 100% true. But I think part of that also is this age, right? Where when you're 17, this is all you've ever known, so it's okay for you to use that because you're comfortable with that. My 17-year-old was doing an application for a job online on his phone, and I said, use my computer. And he said, no, I'm used to this. And so that's okay, but they do need to have access to those other bigger, larger devices, and they need that internet access. So for us, it's still something that we're struggling with. We're working with our community. We're working with our education foundation to get members of the community to provide different access and hotspots and safe places where students can go to do their work.
So the broadband adoption rate in Maine and across the United States is about 75%. So where there is connectivity, what are the reasons that people do not subscribe to broadband? And the number one reason is affordability. So when we work with communities, we very often talk about that. How are you going to address the affordability with your low-income residents? The number 2 and 3 reasons are the affordable equipment and digital literacy training. For the digital literacy training, I've been doing just fine with a pen and paper. What do I need a computer for, right? And so helping adults realize, the parents realize why this is important can certainly make a difference. And if they can't afford broadband or they don't have the equipment, where's the public computer access, as we've talked about before? In Maine, we're really lucky. Most of our libraries have a 100 meg symmetrical connection, and they are open for public computer access. For the adults, once we can get them on board with why this is important, it really drives the economic development. Some of the barriers to educational attainment is time, distance, travel. We hold our classes throughout the state, always at libraries and community centers, career centers, schools. So I think there's many different ways to try to drive that broadband adoption, which then filters down to broadband at home and addressing the homework gap.
So we took a look at a couple plans. You mentioned the school buses, but what we did was we built into every park, in some cases beaches. We looked at every community and we said, can we get an anchor site turned up with free access so the kid can really ride their bike and get someplace where they would have the ability to do their homework. The commissioners came up with a plan where they said the towers that are now connected by fiber, water towers, structures of height, give them away. A lot of times you charge rent to these providers, and we gave them away and said a $20 a month plan for free and reduced meal students. Okay, so now there's a low income plan. And now, hopefully, with these open access hotspots we're putting in these community centers, we have everything from, $99 a month gigabit fiber plans down to low income and free access areas. I would love to talk to the FCC some more about EBS licensing and see if we can get that opened up, because there are some initiatives out there. I think there's actually a county in Virginia that's looking at doing this where you have a one-to-one initiative like Kent County does for technology, and Laura will talk about that. You have the ability in a flat rural county like ours where you could give it away for free. Okay, if we can get that spectrum, then we can put it up on our towers, on our fiber, and you can guarantee every public school student will have access to the internet.
Right, and when we look at the collaboration component, it's about not replicating services between the school and the county government. And so we've really been working well together, ensuring that the funds that we're investing in our infrastructure are working together between the schools and the government, so that our students benefit, but then also the entire community. We're lucky to be able to provide one-to-one K through 12. Pre-K through 12, but that comes with purposeful planning and purposeful budgeting, where we're sitting down together and making sure that we're not replicating things, where we could actually work together to make it happen.
And the white spaces issue is starting to really come alive of trying to use this TV white space to try to get access out to more communities. And certainly we still have rural communities around the country where laying fiber isn't even an option, because we've got some physical challenges like mountains and such that do make it. So we do have schools that are microwaving the signal, even into their school buildings. Not necessarily a problem on this coast so much, but more out west. So here's a curious thing, because we know that anytime there is a creative solution, there are always those who want to say what the challenges might be. So what have been, and we'll just open this up to anyone on the panel, what are some of the key challenges you've heard, whether it's from parents or other community members, about using public funds to get things into the homes or making it access? And what's your response? How have you responded to those challenges? So anyone who wants to hop in on that one.
I'll jump in. So we opened ours up. It's a public-private partnership, and it was an RFP that was thrown out there. But what's interesting is we didn't get one proposal, even though there was millions of dollars on the table from any incumbent providers. Okay, so if you don't want us doing it, then maybe you should participate, you know. And so we did it anyway. And so we actually attracted new competition to come in and offer really high-class service throughout the county. And I don't know how you argue with creating open access hotspots for students that can't afford it. I mean, that's the government's job.
All right. All right. Anyone else?
Well, I think you're always going to have some naysayers, no matter where you are, and no matter what you're talking about. And you just have to rise above it and continue with your mission. And typically you're going to get the majority of, I think, our audiences and the people that we work with are very strong supporters, and they're seeing why this is so important.
Yeah. AJ and Lauren, we heard the commissioner talk about, you know, back in the good old day when you just used the paper and the pencil and the textbook to go home and do your homework, and that there are still many school systems who use lack of equitable access as a reason not to move forward with leveraging technology for teaching and learning. Why is it important that schools continue to move forward and engage in those technologies? Why not just sit back and say, well, if everybody doesn't have it, we shouldn't do it?
I think we're doing our students a disservice if we do that. We're no longer preparing them for our future. We're preparing them for their future, and we don't know what that looks like in this day and age. You know, who thought, you know, when I was a kid, I'd be carrying around a cell phone and, you know, talking to my mom in New York, you know, through FaceTime. Those kinds of things, we need to teach our students a skill set that we don't even know about. And so we have to prepare them to be able to utilize devices, utilize technology, and it doesn't have to be device specific, but you do have to enable them with that skill set so they can move forward, whether it's college or career readiness. And by not putting these devices in our students' hands, we are not preparing them for their future, and it's going to put them at a disadvantage going forward.
Right, I agree with that, AJ.
Yeah.
And when you look at, when we use the term technology, it is not technology to a child if they were born and it was already there.
Right.
So when you look at what we sometimes term as technology, that's like tying their shoes. That's what they wake up with and what they're used to. So I agree with what you said, AJ, in that we are doing them a disservice if we're not preparing them for what they will be using every single day. We want them to be global citizens. We want them to be responsible citizens. So we need to ensure that we provide them the opportunities in the classroom as well as beyond the classroom to have those experiences as they're growing up so that they can learn what is responsible use, what does it mean to be a truly connected global citizen. And they can start doing that at very young ages. We see them doing it on Twitter. We see them making those impacts on YouTube. And so that's where I see the potential there for our children.
Absolutely. Susan?
So in keeping the parents up to speed is just equally as important. And when we think about this, when I started Axiom back in 2005, it was during AOL and Earthlink, and you have mail. And what's the E on the screen? And who the heck is Microsoft, right? And so the technology has evolved around us. And frankly, it really doesn't matter whether you're rural or you're urban. It doesn't matter what your economic status is. It doesn't matter what your educational attainment is. It doesn't matter where you live. We are all in the same place, and technology has evolved around us. And just when I think I haven't figured it out, somebody comes out with a new program. So it's going to be a continual learning for all of us, and we just have to embrace it.
And it goes along with not only going to college, but career-wise. You know, our what we so-called considered our blue-collar workers, plumbers, electricians, HVAC, you know, all of that has a technology component to it. You can't just go in and go, oh, I'm going to fix your air conditioning. You know, you do need to get some of those classes because now a lot of it has that technology component to it that they're not prepared for. And, you know, people who have been in that industry for years are now having to go back and learn different ways. And our kids coming up are going into it like, oh, yeah, that's nothing. I know how to do that. So it's preparing them college and career as well.
How many of you on the panel had a math teacher, and I was a former math teacher, that told you that it was really important to learn how to multiply and divide out to the 4th decimal place because you would never be walking around with a calculator in your pocket? Yeah. I have one on my wrist now, so it's not even a matter of that. And how many students today actually really truly need to sit down and make an outline so that they can write their paper in linear order as opposed to doing it word processing? You know, the only time they still have to do that, like an AP exam, right? That's
absolutely right.
So they have to learn that process so they can take some of these exams that haven't necessarily modernized. So I'm the parent of 2 children as well, and they do certainly come home every day from school and are doing my second grader is still working on her math facts, also working on her reading practice online with the properly leveled books for her. My middle schooler is coming home. She has a flipped classroom, so she's getting her instruction at home in the evening and doing different things during the school day. And I really think about, those kids who don't have the same access at home. What are some of the risks that they have, not just not being able to get homework done, but really what are the skill sets that they're going to be left without? And I'll open it up to anyone.
Sure, I can chime in there. So when a child does not have that access at home, they may or may not have parents or guardian there to support them in their learning. By providing them access to even a YouTube video or a Khan Academy video, allows them to still get high-quality instruction if they are struggling with their homework. And so if the parent or guardian doesn't know how to assist them with, say, a particular math problem or with a science experiment, by providing them the connectivity, they can then access a video of an expert who does know how to show them how to complete that problem or complete that science experiment. And that's where it can make a significant impact for that child. They don't need to have the adult there in the room to walk them through it. They can access it through any online medium.
So these are incredibly important workforce development skills. And if they start at an early age, it makes it a little bit easier as they transition into the workforce. But it is essential for them to have, to be digitally literate and as they move into the work environment.
So what are the partnerships that are important? I mean, we have, schools represented, we have local government, we have the National Digital Equity Center. How can these organizations work together, and why is it critical that they work together? And we can start down there with Scott and Lauren, who came as a team today.
Yeah, we have a great relationship. It's been wonderful since Laura joined us in August.
Right.
And one of the reasons you came here was because of what you saw with the fiber.
Absolutely.
And the superintendent, shared the project with her, and she saw what the future can be in Kent County because of the resources that we have now. And so I think, going back to your earlier question about, do you push it out there without the infrastructure in place? I really like the idea that they do push us, because then they come to us and they say, hey, we've got these Maseratis, we need a superhighway. And then it goes back to the local government to figure out how to get it done. And I think we've done a pretty effective job.
So we collaborate with everybody, and we think that it takes many hands to get the job done. Our favorite collaborator are the libraries. We just love libraries. We also have an advisory committee for the National Digital Equity Center that are leaders throughout the state of Maine. And basically, what I have put out to them is what is the digital equity plan for each of our industry sectors. So if we're talking forestry, what's the digital equity plan? Let's at least address it and make it front and center and make it part of that conversation.
And I think for us, it's really talking with our internet service providers in the area and utilizing what grants and things that they have. Our Education Foundation in Prince William County Schools has been huge in connecting us with communities, business owners, to ensure there's grants and a variety of things to help us with ensuring that our students are, we're bridging that digital divide so they have the access they need.
All right, so sort of a wish question here. As you continue your work to try to close the digital divide, to address the homework gap, what are your hopes and dreams? What would you wish could happen? if you had the ear of, say, some senators and an FCC commissioner, what would you like to have happen?
I just want everyone to think like I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
There
you go. Yeah.
That's an easy one.
I think, I agree with Susan. The importance of it, right? And I think that we still do have parents that, they don't need that. My student will never go to college. They're just going to, get a blue-collar job. You still need that connectedness. You still need to be connected and to be able to learn those skills. And I think having parents, different generations understand the importance of it and think like Susan does, think like we all do here, would make a huge difference to get us over that divide. Because once everybody sees its importance, then everybody's all in and game on.
Great.
Yeah, I'd like that Spectrum, the EBS license. If we can get that, this carries over. It's not just education now; it's economic development, because now we're talking about quality of life. One feeds the other, and so if you can guarantee every public school student has access to the internet at home, fiber is one thing, but that's really gonna keep kids. I had an intern who I actually carried her thank you card around from 2014, and she had no internet at home, and people are going to associate how they grew up with the county, and a lot of those kids are going to leave because the county doesn't have what they need. And so I keep that as a reminder to keep pushing through to get this work done. And the other thing I'll say is that if you're going to do this, it's all consuming. I mean, you have to be a champion. It's all consuming through the ups and the downs. And I tell this story. My 8-year-old was visiting a new friend, and when my wife went to go pick her up, the mom said, "Your daughter was just telling us that we need fiber at our house," and and that's the way it is. You know what I mean? It's all consuming, not just for you, but for your family.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to make that sacrifice.
All right.
Right. And my wish list is that all children have what they need when they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll open it up now for questions from our audience here. Anyone have a question that they would like to ask of our panelists? Yes, ma'am.
Tribes that are in rural areas? So we work with the Passamaquoddy tribe in Washington County, and we started putting broadband up there many, many years ago. We're really trying to actively increase that service to a fiber to the home project. And digital literacy matters in those communities. Affordability matters in those communities. We also do the adult education there, so we have a lot of different ways to reach the audience that's there. I think mostly it's building the relationship with the tribal leaders and a level of trust. I think that's probably the number one thing to working with any of the tribal members.
And I know our group from West Virginia, as we were prepping for the call, actually addressed that as well. They have been working also with some of the tribes in their area to try to provide access. Yes, ma'am.
So E-rate is really important in Maine. We have the Maine School and Library Network, and the majority of our schools and libraries are connected through that consortium. About 90% of those libraries and schools have fiber, and they all deliver at least 100 meg symmetrical connection. The challenge with that network is that we have an underground of fiber throughout the entire state that we cannot access in some of those rural communities. So that's a challenge. For instance, I live in Jonesport, Maine, which is about 20 miles off of Route 1, which is where there's 3-ring binder. At our library, which is a part-time library, there's 100 meg symmetrical connection. I can't, if I wanted to deliver fiber to the home in downtown Jonesport, I cannot use that as my backhaul. So that's a challenge with E-rate. And your second question? Oh, the three-ring binder is our middle mile project that was part of the BTOP stimulus. 5G is just another tool in the toolbox. So, when you look in the wireless world, there's lots of different technologies in the wireless world. There's line of sight and non-line of sight. So 5G will be one of those tools that will be used. It's in some areas it's going to work really well, and in some areas it may not work so well. We embrace any of the new technologies that are coming out and try to figure out what's the best use for them.
Yeah. Welcome. All right. Yes, sir.
I was curious if you could also speak to any of the challenges in terms of your local areas being range or partnering with private sector in terms of securing rights of way, distributing technologies and
So most of our E-rate projects are by the larger incumbent providers have bid on those, and they have those contracts. We do build network out. One particular one is on an island off the coast of Maine. In order to avoid the make-ready, which is the connection to the poles and the very expensive component to it, we put in our own poles and laid fiber on the ground. So we got really creative of how to make that happen and to keep the costs down. So you just have to think outside the box for a lot of projects. And just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean we can't do it. We just have to try. Yeah.
Anybody else want to hit on that one? Okay. Same question. Go ahead.
So more fiber matters. Right, so even if you're talking wireless always goes to ground. So the more fiber that you have on the ground is going to power up those wireless networks to help in those areas that fiber might be a real challenge to get to. So you have. You have through the BTOP, we had a lot of those middle mile projects that are open access networks. Expanding those is really important, and getting out into those really rural areas is very important. Fiber costs about $25,000 to $30,000 per mile to build. And when you're looking in rural areas where there's a house every 10 miles, it doesn't build a business case to build fiber. So building network out so that you can support those wireless networks is really important. And along the way, you may be able to deliver some fiber to the home.
And I'll add into that, too, with a story from my local community. So I live just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, and places like Google and such are really excited to get into big cities like Raleigh, but I live actually in a little town called Holly Springs outside of Raleigh, and they don't seem to want to come out there quite yet. However, our local government, so Scott, thinking along those lines there, decided that they wanted fiber laid out to their local government buildings, and so in the negotiations, in their RFP process, the requirement was if you win this bid, you will also commit to at least laying the fiber throughout the town of Holly Springs to the out into the neighborhoods and such, so that if families choose to have access to it, they have that option. So looking at those opportunities to engage both with the government and the local community to get access out to the homes as well. And of course, that's a best case scenario. We're talking about laying fiber. In many cases with the Homework Gap, we're talking about getting any access at all. Many of us were able to kind of get engaged with this project and able to talk around this project. And you've heard several of our panelists talk about the importance of libraries. We're all very excited to be a part of a group and an organization called Shelby, which is the School Health and Libraries for Broadband. And they have been able to really engage us in how we think about the importance of all of our anchor institutions in providing access to the public. And we've heard some stories here Other thoughts around the importance of anchor institutions in your community and getting access to the public and to students?
Yeah, sure. If you want more information about our project, it's fiber.kentcounty.com. There's an interactive map on there. You can see how it was all built. And so we connected our anchor sites. We did it in such a way that those homes that you're talking about, the $25,000, $30,000 a mile, they're within about 2.5 miles of the backbone. And so now, instead of having to build from point A to Z, which they can't afford to do, they can now lease it away from the network, which is why we think P3s are so important. We can't do it on our own. They can't do it on their own. So it's not a true municipal network at all. Okay, we have ours, they have theirs. But because we partnered up, we were able to get that close to the home. And that's why there are neighborhoods that you would think would be low-hanging fruit that were not connected that now are.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts? All right, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Question, but also I'll make a small plug. I'm with a company called OneWeb, and we're hoping to build a satellite constellation of one towards the next year that will reach rural remote areas and provide broadband coverage. So as we talk about fiber, and I know we're talking about building out the networks, some of that is still going to be a challenge, right? But that rate won't necessarily change. Somebody brought up microwave alternative options that you've seen already.
Done a lot of work with multiple different spectrums in the wireless world. Some of those high capacity. TV white space is an important one. The new radios right now will be delivering a 25/3, so we'll meet the FCC standards. It's not the end all and be all, but it's just, again, it's another tool in that toolbox. And for areas that are in the middle of trees, which Maine is all trees. There's just they're not going to let me cut them down, right? So, you've got to figure out a way around it, right? Satellites is interesting. I mean, we've been watching it. And, where we are, where satellite is, it's just that far outside. So it's a little bit tougher. We do have some satellite connections. We don't, but there is some satellite service. But weather matters on the connectivity for that, and it's also data capped, so that can be a very challenge, especially for a family. So you look at what's out there, whatever the latest technologies are. I mean, fiber is fiber, right? And the more we have, the better we are. But using that blended technology and adding the wireless where it makes the most sense, absolutely can work. Yeah.
All right. Other questions? All right. Closing thoughts then. One last opportunity to kind of share what you are thinking around the need for closing the digital divide and the homework gap.
Don't forget us. It is important. It is just another piece in education that we need to do for our students. We can't leave them behind. And if we don't start making some changes soon, unfortunately, they will get left behind. And only those who are financially able to, make that connection will be okay. And we can't do that. We need to include everybody. So just keep that in mind.
So I think I can speak for this entire panel. We're resources. We're very, reach out to us because, if we don't have the answers, we usually know somebody who does. And we're all very committed to closing that digital divide across the United States.
Yeah, I would say joining an organization like Shelby is probably one of the best things you can do. I mean, I look forward to those emails coming in, some of the brightest minds out there, and they're all focused on the same thing. So I definitely would look into them. And also, this is phase one. I mean, what we did is a pretty massive project, but it's the foundation. And so, everybody wants that 100% right away. It's not going to happen, right? There's going to be another phase and another phase. New technologies are going to come. But now, with the fiber, the platform's there. You're future-proofing your county and your school system.
Right. And I view it, as AJ said, advocating for our children and the future that they need to have.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for being here, and thanks to our panelists for coming in on this rainy day. So we do want to continue to advocate for all of our students because this is, and I think the big piece here is that this is absolutely an issue for education, but it's also an economic issue. It is sort of the infrastructure issue of our day, and that's how we need to start shifting our thinking. Is thinking of this more around an infrastructure issue. We want to make sure our homes have electricity and roads. We need to make sure our homes have access to broadband in the same way. So thank you all, and our panelists will be around if you have any additional questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job, team.
Good job.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
How are you? Yes, I'm so glad. It's so good to see your face.
Good to meet you. I hate that I missed the beginning of it, but the traffic was crazy. Hi, how are you?
They got me on a 6 a.m.
Oh, okay. Oh, you did? Oh,
Beverly, fine. That's what I am. I'm going to go